Hey everybody, I'm Kim Shannon with PokerStrategy.com, and I am here with the incredibly handsome Tony Dunst. Hi, Tony.
How you doing, Kim?
I'm well, thank you. And we are here at the WPT Borgata Poker Open from the final table, which you were supposed to be broadcasting live, and what happened?
We're getting into the broadcast, but then we had some kind of technical difficulty with the internet such that it was creating connectivity issues for our viewers, and we didn't want to put out a bad product, so we put the kibosh on that, had to shut down the stream, and unfortunately it's just going to be the televised format for this episode.
Wah wah.
Yeah.
That stinks. We were looking forward to hearing what you had to say, because everybody knows you're like, you know, you and Olivia Bousquet are two of the fan favorites when it comes to commentary. But let me ask you this, Tony. You were in the main event, were you not?
I was.
And talk to us a little bit about some things that you saw in general, some mistakes that you saw players making, and what you think maybe they could have done differently. Did you personally make any mistakes, and what you could have done differently? Give us a little strategic content.
Sure. I was in this event for 3 days. I late registered on day one because I was just kind of tired and wasn't feeling my best. So I came in at the 100, 200 level with about 30,000. And actually at my first table, people played fairly sensible. Now at the Borgata event, you always get a huge field. It's almost 1,200 for this. And the quality of play is fairly low. You get a lot of recreational or only semi-experienced players in here. And there's a certain natural aggression to the personality of some East Coasters, so they often will have that element to their game, but it's not as selected and it's not as thoughtful as some of the aggression you see from more skillful opponents. And then you just get plenty of recreational players who are too loose, too passive, call far too much, don't hand read well. I remember the pot that I won on day one that really put me over the top and gave me an opportunity to run deep in this was just a case of someone not thinking very clearly about, you know, reverse implied odds of playing a big re-raised pot. I actually had aces because I'm a nit.
Can you, just for people that aren't as advanced, maybe
Sure.
you can explain reverse implied odds?
Sure. So when you have implied odds, you're thinking about how you can hit a hand, be it, you know, going to the flop or on future streets, that you can garner more money from your opponent from. So you think about your immediate odds, what is the price the pot is laying me relative to what I have to pay to continue in the hand. And then you also think about your implied odds, which are what amount of money should I anticipate being able to get from my opponent later on in this hand, and then you try and factor that in. Reverse implied odds are what you have to think about the hand potentially costing you if you make the second best hand and you have to call down. So that's something you want to think about, like when you're in situations when you have a weak flush draw and someone might be playing their hand as though they have a larger flush draw. There may be reverse implied odds there. There are a lot of reverse implied odds in terms of pre-flop scenarios where people call out of the blind. They're like, oh, I'm getting a really cheap immediate price, but they don't think about the reverse implied odds of making second best hands post-flop or making poorer decisions than their opponent post-flop because they're out of position.
Thank you for that.
No worries. In this particular scenario, my opponent and I were each about 55, about 55,000 deep. He actually had like 100, I had 55. And a player under the gun with about 9,000 limped for 500 at 255. I was next to act with aces and made it 1,600, and I thought this player on my right was very likely to limp shove, considering his stack and the fact that he was a younger player.
So you're saying you find that younger players are just more aggressive in general?
Generally are more aggressive.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, I'm going to chase you down in a minute. Yep. And then the player 2 on my left, who I mentioned having a larger stack, called. Another player called behind him, and then when it folded back to the under the gun player, he did move in for about 9,000 total. And since I wanted the other player involved, who was quite loose to play, and I had observed him being kind of loose passive in general, I decided to just call instead of making a re-raise with my aces, which led to him just calling as well, and then the other opponent folded. The hand he made the call with was the ace-deuce of spades, which is not really a quality enough hand when you're calling off another 8,000 and you're only getting, you know, I'm trying to think, if I had 50K there, you know, there's only about 40K to potentially win off of me, and he's got to call off like 8-ish more. So he's got what is that, like 5 to 1?
It's going to be four-ish, high 4-ish, 5 to 1, yeah.
Yeah. So we go to a flop which was 9-3-9 rainbow with one spade, and I decided that I would check to this guy. He checked behind. Turn was a 5 of spades. I bet rather
What were you
large.
thinking when you checked?
I thought that if he was a very loose player, he would probably get to that flop really often, and that it was a flop that wasn't going to connect with him frequently, and that since he was straightforward, if I just bet out, he would probably fold every time he didn't have a pair. And I thought if I let him catch up a little on the turn, then perhaps he'll pay me off. And also, if he has a pair, I think that he ends up just paying me off big either way. Like, I think if I just bet on the flop and he has a pair, he won't fold. But I also think if I check the flop, he'll bet every time he has a pair. So I don't really lose any money there. So he checked behind. The turn was a 5 of spades, adding a flush draw. I bet 15,000, leaving myself 27 behind. He thought it over and called, and the river was an offsuit ace. So I hit my absolute one-out gin card. I moved all in, and then he ended up calling it off, and I don't necessarily blame him that much for his river call. Like,
Really?
I think my hand, to anybody who's played a lot of poker, looks blatantly like aces, but it's also kind of a hard hand for me to have. And I mean, what hand am I jamming with that's worse than ace deuce there? Unless he really thinks I'm crazy, but I hadn't done anything all that
Yeah.
crazy. So it was one of those scenarios where just making the call pre-flop for another 8,000 puts him in a situation where it's likely to have reverse implied odds, which is I'm probably not, especially with another player all in, going to bluff or spew off my chips to him. But if I connect and he makes the second best hand, then he just might get stacked like that.
Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, that's Tony Dunst talking to us about reverse implied odds and the damage,
That
right?
they could potentially cause.
Wowzers, yeah. And I know you're super, super busy, so I'm going to say thank you for just giving us that tiny bit. And again, you know, we're really going to miss hearing your live commentary. It's unfortunate that the stream is down, but...
Well, we'll do it again in Jacksonville in early November, and everyone can check it out there.
all right, great. Thanks again, Tony. Kim Shannon with PokerStrategy.com, and leaving... Just going to cut it there.